Welcome to Magic Towns, Italy. We're your source for, well, pretty much everything you need to know about expat life in Italy.
And today we've got some really important updates to cover. Plus, we'll be taking a closer look at a specific Italian town that might just catch your eye.
Yeah, some things you'll definitely want to be aware of if Italy is on your radar. Let's dive right in.
Let's kick off with something significant for anyone looking at Italian citizenship through their ancestry, your sanguinis, right? There have been some pretty major changes announced, specifically setting a two-generation limit, and there's talk of a future genuine connection requirement to a two-generation limit.
For people maybe tracing back to great grandparents or even further, this changes the game completely. It really does. And the reaction has been quite.
Very strong. There's a petition circulating, gaining a lot of traction. Interesting. Where did that come from? Well, it actually started in a Facebook group. Um, Originally, the group was just about
Helping Americans and Canadians navigate residency stuff in Italy. So these are people already quite invested then, not just casually interested.
exactly. And that's a point they're really emphasizing that the people signing are serious. They're professionals, retirees, people genuinely planning to move and live in Italy.
So they're trying to counter that narrative, maybe the government's concern about people just wanting a passport without real ties. They're saying, no, we want to be part of the community.
Contribute, and some of the personal stories shared, they're quite powerful. We've kept them anonymous, of course. Like what kind of stories? Well, there's someone who wanted to retire in their mother's ancestral town in Sicily, to honor her memory. Her grandparents were from there. Now the path is unclear,
Oh, wow.
and another person spent years, literally years, digging into family history, learning Italian. Now the goal posts have moved.
And you can imagine the frustration.
Definitely. Someone else has a consulate appointment set for 2026, finally got it scheduled, and they got the concerns. But call this decision really harsh. Yeah, after all that waiting, and then there's a woman pregnant, already fluent in Italian, wanting to make the move. But the idea of waiting 3 years for naturalization without being able to earn an income easily, it's just not feasible for her family right now, and these are real life impacts hitting people's plans hard. There was one person who actually moved in 2024, signed a lease, started the paperwork, hit some snags, and now, because of this law change, they might have to leave. They mentioned loving San Remo, feeling connected.
It's tough. It sounds like it invalidates a part of their identity almost, that connection to heritage being tied up in citizenship.
That's exactly the sentiment coming through, and the financial cost too. We heard from a couple, they'd spent over $100,000 on the process, planning their move, and now apparently due to some error along the way, they're uneligible under the new rules.
100,000, that's devastating.
It is, and these stories, they connect generations. Someone trying to honor a great-great-grandfather who specifically chose not to naturalize in the US, wanting to maintain that Italian link. Now that effort feels erased.
And what about parents wanting to pass this on?
That's another big concern. Parents who already hold citizenship, worrying they might not be able to pass it down to their kids if the rules tighten further, or depending on how this genuine connection thing is interpreted down the line.
So are they just reacting or are they suggesting alternatives?
They are proposing something. The petition suggests a minimum residency requirement, say 2 years living in Italy, before applying for citizenship by descent. Their argument is this shows genuine commitment. helps populate towns, boosts the local economy, addresses some government concerns perhaps, but keeps the door open.
A potential middle ground then. And you said the petition took off quickly.
Yeah, over 500 responses in just the first week. And it really shows the depth of feeling out there among the diaspora.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Something more immediately financial, perhaps. The dollar versus the euro.
This affects anyone living in Europe on a US dollar income or planning to. The dollar has been weakening against the euro recently.
We've noticed. What are we seeing now?
We're hovering around, say, 1.13 euros to the dollar. And some analysts think it could drift towards 1.2.
Which is quite different from what we've seen for a while, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. For the best part of the last decade, the dollar was strong, often near one-to-one parity with euro. If you go way back, like 2007, 2008, the euro was much stronger, peaking around $1.50. So we're moving away from that recent dollar strength.
What's driving this weakening of the dollar?
Continued uncertainty around trade tariffs, maybe some jitters about a potential economic slowdown in the US. There's also a sense that investors might be looking beyond the US now, sort of moving away from that US exceptionalism idea that dominated for a while. Markets crave certainty and things feel a bit less predictable.
And predicting currency is always tricky, short term, anyway.
Short-term predictions are tough, but I think it's safe to expect continued choppiness, especially through the rest of 2025. Maybe further weakening is possible. Currency markets react to news, speculation, lots of factors.
So, bottom line for an American retiree in Italy, living on their pension or savings, what does this mean day to day?
It means their buying power goes down. Simple as that. If the exchange rate drops 10%, your dollars buy 10% less stuff in euros. If it's at a 1.2 mark, that's potentially another 7 or 8% drop.
That adds up quickly, especially on a fixed income. Are there ways for expats to
Protect themselves a bit? Yes, definitely. There are strategies. One is currency hedging. Some platforms like Revolut, for example, lets you lock in an exchange rate for a period, though there's usually a fee involved. It buys you some certainty. Okay, locking in a rate. What else? Building up a reserve of euros can be smart. Exchange some dollars when the rate seems okay rather than waiting until you absolutely need euros and the rate might be worse. Avoid panic conversions.
make sense?
And for those with investments, you can look at euro hedged assets. Think certain US Treasury funds or S&P 500 ETFs that are specifically designed to neutralize the effect of euro dollar fluctuations on your returns.
Right, hedging within the investment itself.
Also, a really practical tip, watch those exchange fees. Using fintech services like Wise or Revolut usually costs you around 0.5%, maybe less. Traditional banks, they can easily charge 5% or more in hidden fees, and that difference is huge over time. That's a big one.
And what about this laddering idea?
You exchange smaller amounts regularly, maybe some every month or every few weeks. Why do that? It smooths out the risk. You won't catch the absolute best rate probably, but you won't get caught out by the absolute worst either. It averages things out. It gives you flexibility, less stressful than trying to time a market perfectly.
Kind of dollar cost averaging, but for currency?
Exactly. The key message really is don't panic. Currency markets fluctuate. They always have. Plan ahead, use some of these tools if they suit you. And
And perspective is important too, right?
absolutely. Even with these shifts, the cost of living in many parts of Italy compared, say, major US cities or other parts of Europe often still looks pretty attractive.
Let's use that as a bridge to our featured town, Pescara. Tell us about it.
Pescara, yes. It's a city on the Adriatic coast in the Abruzzo region. It's becoming quite popular, drawing interest from expats and retirees.
Adriatic Coast, Abruzzo, what's the appeal?
Well, it's got a few things going for it. Really good transport connections, for one. It's known for its seafood being right on the coast. It has a pretty vibrant nightlife scene, apparently, and various cultural spots, too.
Sounds lively. What's the general vibe?
You get that coastal city feel, obviously, with beach access. But you're also not far from the Apennine Mountains, so there's variety in landscape nearby. Food-wise, as I said, seafood is king, lots of fresh pasta, and Abruzzo has a strong wine culture too. Culturally, think theaters, art galleries, that sort of thing.
Nice mix. Any potential challenges someone should know about if they're considering?
Pescara, yeah, always good to know the other side. Public transport outside the city center might be a bit sparse, so a car could be useful, especially for exploring the region.
Okay, car might be needed.
It is Mediterranean warm summers, generally short, mild winters, but summers can get quite warm, humid too, being coastal. And like much of Italy outside the main tourist hubs, where you'll find some English, learning Italian is pretty key for daily life and really integrating.
Standard advice for most places in Italy, really. So let's flip it. What are the big pros for expats or retirees looking at Pescara?
Okay, key advantages. Access to quality healthcare services is noted. Air quality gets a good rating, which is always a plus. Unemployment is relatively low for the area.
Very foundational things.
Definitely. Then you have the cultural side. Um, Lots of historical sites, museums nearby. The transport links are a big pro. Abruzzo Airport is close, good train connections, the mild climate, lots of sunshine, opportunities to get involved socially, community events. Internet seems reliable and fast, good range of schools if that's a factor. Then, well, those coastal views don't hurt.
Sounds like a solid list. What about the cons, the potential downsides to weigh up?
Sure, while there's nightlife, some might find it limited compared to, say, Rome or Milan. Being a coastal city, you do get a tourist influx, especially in summer.
Right, peak season.
The healthcare score, while services are considered good, suggests it might not rank top tier nationally in every single specialty. Infrastructure gets a decent score, but maybe indicates some room for improvement in local roads or maintenance. Coastal weather means those potentially hot, humid summers we mentioned. Flight options from the local airport are okay for Europe, but may be limited for direct long haul. Specialized education might be limited. Occasional language barriers, as we said, and the job market might not suit every profession.
A balanced picture, then. Good to have both sides. Can we get a bit more specific on things like transport and amenities?
Yeah, absolutely. Transport. Abruzzo Airport is super close, like 7 minutes drive. Ancona Airport is about 76 minutes. Tiampino near Rome is about 90 minutes. Rail is strong too. Pascal Port in Nuova Station is 3 minutes away. Pascal Central, 5 minutes. So
That's convenient. And day-to-day stuff, shops, restaurants, plenty nearby.
you're looking at like 180 auto shops, over 250 bars, 130 plus restaurants, lots of supermarkets, pharmacies. The usual essentials are all readily available. Plus, a beach is just a 6 minute drive, and a ski resort, Passo Lanziano, is under an hour away.
Beach and mountains nearby, nice. You mentioned healthcare scores. Any more detail there?
It's interesting. While the overall hospital rank might be lower nationally, Pescara actually excels in certain areas like minimally invasive breast cancer surgery. Cardiology seems good for heart attack readmissions, but maybe more average for heart failure outcomes. So it's a bit specific. Good to know those nuances. What about safety environment? Earthquakes, flooding. Earthquake risk is rated moderate to low. Road accident rate is about 18 per 10,000 people. There is a notable flood risk exposure for a fair chunk of the population, around 53%, something to be aware of depending on location within the city. Air quality, as mentioned, is generally good, rated 92. Okay, and property, if someone wants to buy, housing availability seems high, lots on the market.
Got it. And digitally, walkability.
The score is very high on walkability, and internet speeds are impressive. Average download around 232. So good for remote work or just staying connected.
Fast internet is always a bonus. And the climate summarized.
Generally mild and pleasant. Plenty of sunshine. Winters are short, not too harsh. Minimum January temps around 3 degrees city. Summers are warm. July max temps average around 29.3 degrees city. Overall, a comfortable climate for many.
Okay. That gives a really good feel for Pescara. The good, the maybe challenging, and the practical details. Thanks for that rundown.
You're welcome. It's definitely a city with its own character, that mix of Adriatic life and urban convenience.
So that wraps up our deep dive for today. We've covered the significant changes potentially affecting Italian citizenship by descent, the current dynamics of the dollar-euro exchange rate and what it means for you, and taking a close look at Pescara and Abruzzo. Lots to think about there indeed. For much more detail on all of this, including in-depth town data like we discussed for Pescara, plus loads of resources specifically for expats and retirees planning a move to Italy,
Head over to Magic Towns. You'll find more articles, guides, and info on relocation.
thanks so much for joining us for this exploration of life in Italy, brought to you by Magic Towns Italy.